Have you ever wondered, is the emergence of humankind on Earth merely a coincidence? And what if we could turn back time to any point in evolutionary history, and then let everything start over from there? In the late 1980s, American paleontologist Stephen Zygmunt proposed a famous thought experiment. To this day, it remains a problem that continues to perplex and engage evolutionary biologists. Gunt believed that if time could be reversed, the process of evolution would push life in a completely different direction, and our human species would never appear again. In fact, he argues that the process of human evolution is so exceedingly rare that if we could rewind the tape of life a million times, we would be unlikely to see humans emerge even once more. His theory posits that random events play an extremely important role in the evolutionary process. They include large-scale mass extinction events, such as asteroid impacts and catastrophic volcanic eruptions. However, at the molecular level, random events still occur. Genetic mutation is the foundation of the evolutionary adaptation process, although it largely depends on random events. Simply put, evolution is the result of random mutations. Some rare mutations can help organisms adapt and survive better than other individuals in specific environments. The divergence of one species into two originates from rare mutations, which gradually become more common over time. However, other random processes can still continue to interfere, leading to the risk of losing beneficial mutations and accumulating harmful ones over time. Given this inherent randomness, if we were to rewind the tape of life many times, each replay would produce a different form of life. Of course, in reality, we cannot turn back time in this way. We will never be able to know for certain what the percentage chance was of evolving into our present form. However, fortunately, experimental evolutionary biologists have the means to test some of Darwin's hypotheses at the microscopic level on bacterial species. Because this organism divides and evolves at a very rapid rate, we can freeze billions of identical cells and store them indefinitely. This allows us to isolate a small group of cells, introduce them into a new and challenging environment to grow, and observe their adaptive changes in real time. Essentially, we can freely travel from the present to the future and back to the past as many times as we wish, much like replaying a recording of life in a test tube. Studies on bacterial evolution have revealed something that might surprise us. In the short term, evolution often follows predictable paths. Given the similar characteristics and mobility solutions, this situation frequently occurs. For example, consider a long-term experiment that has been running since 1988, in which 12 independent populations of E. coli bacteria, all created from a single clone, have been continuously evolving. And so, they have produced over 65,000 generations, whereas since the emergence of modern humans, we have only undergone approximately 7,500 to 10,000 generations. All evolutionary populations in this experiment exhibited higher adaptability, faster growth rates, and larger cell sizes compared to the ancestral population. This indicates that the evolutionary capacity of organisms is not limitless, but rather has certain constraints. There are evolutionary forces that help keep organisms developing in a straight path, without deviating. Natural selection is the mechanism that directs the evolutionary process. This law governs the chaos of random mutations while simultaneously promoting beneficial ones. This means that over time, the majority of changes will gradually disappear, and only the most suitable ones can endure long-term. This can also lead to entirely different species developing identical survival strategies. We can see evidence of this throughout evolutionary history, in species that are not closely related. But living in the same environment, they developed a similar characteristic. However, migratory architecture also plays an extremely important role. Not all genes play the same role. Some genes are far more important than others. Genes are often organized into networks that function similarly to an electrical circuit with backup switches and master switches. A mutation in a master gene will lead to far more significant changes, as it directly impacts and influences all the genes under its control. This indicates that certain positions in the genome are more frequently affected by evolutionary processes or have greater functional impacts compared to others. What about the fundamental laws of physics? Do they support the idea that evolution is predictable? On a macroscopic scale, this appears to be true. We know that the vast majority of the laws governing the universe are inherently precise. For example, it is thanks to gravity that we have oceans, a dense atmosphere, and the nuclear fusion within the sun, an abundant source of energy for us. It is a predictable force. Isaac Newton's theories, which are based on deterministic forces, not only apply to large-scale systems but can also be used to describe many systems at that scale. They describe the universe in a completely predictable way. If Newton's perspective had remained absolutely correct, human evolution would have been inevitable. However, that ease of predictability was completely shattered when the fantastical world with its quantum mechanical paradoxes was discovered in the 20th century. At the smallest level of molecules and particles, true randomness comes into play, which means that even at the most fundamental level, our world is unpredictable. This means that the general laws of the evolutionary process would not change, no matter how many times we were to restart life and repeat the process. There will always be an evolutionary advantage for organisms capable of harnessing solar energy. At the same time, there will always be an opportunity for those that know how to utilize the gases available in the atmosphere. And from these adaptations, we can envision the formation of familiar ecosystems. However, by nature, the inherent randomness in most evolutionary processes makes it impossible for us to predict the future with absolute certainty. In observational astronomy, there is a problem considered a very apt analogy. In the 1700s, a mathematics institute offered a prize to anyone who could solve a problem concerning prime numbers. That is, to accurately describe the relationship between gravity and orbit, derived from that very relationship between the Sun, Earth, and Moon. Essentially, the winner proved that this problem cannot have a precise solution. Just as chaos is caused by random mutations, a single small error at the beginning is certain to spread widely. That is to say, it is difficult to predict the future outcome of these three entities. But as the dominant entity, the Sun dictates the orbital motion of all three celestial bodies. This is very much like a guiding hand of evolution, one that forces organisms to adapt along well-trodden paths. We can never be entirely certain of the person we would become if given the chance to turn back time. However, the viable evolutionary pathways for organisms are not limitless. And for that very reason, humankind will likely never appear again. But perhaps, no matter what alien world replaces our own, in the end, it too will become a familiar one.